project, which aims to start in the new year. My name's Emma House, and I am the project lead on this, the supplier that's been hired by Libraries Connected to run this project, working closely with publishers and libraries. So the aim of the webinar is to explain the project, its objectives, timeline, and how libraries can get involved and sign up to work with us on this. It's been over 10 years since we first saw eBook lending launch in the UK, and we know that a lot has changed in that time, particularly during the pandemic, where we saw a surge in eBook lending, but also on the retail side of things, eBook sales also increased significantly. We've also seen the extension of the public lending right payments to authors for eBook lending. And so it was felt that it's really timely that we retake a look at the process, business models, how eBook lending works in public libraries, and see if we can, through the series of pilots that we're going to introduce in January, if we can change the dial on a few of the frustrations that currently exist around the model in its entirety. So I'm going to hand over to Ian Moore from Libraries Connected, Anthony Hopkins from Merton Libraries and chair of the eBook Working Group, and also James Urquhart from Arts Council England, who is kindly funding this project. So Ian, over to you.
Thank you, Emma. And I think it's probably worth us going straight to James just to hear about Arts Council's perspective of the project and where we are with e-licensing and what they're hoping from the project.
Thank you, Emma. Thank you, Ian. It was really good to be here. Thank you for inviting me. And we're delighted to be here, both as participants and funders. So a quick word about the Arts Council and libraries, and straight into this particular project. So Arts Council England has a development, advocacy and funding remit for cultural and creative organisations, museums and libraries in England. We've tailored our open rolling funding programme, National Lottery Project Grants, to be more receptive to public library needs by making project activities delivering on any of the 4 universal library offers eligible for funding, even where they don't sit within our general remit of culture and creativity. Stimulating reading for pleasure as a creative activity in all communities and contexts is central to the Arts Council's literature objectives. It strongly aligns with our 10-year strategy, Let's Create, and of course, the Reading Universal Library offer. We celebrate the intrinsic value of reading for pleasure, but we also recognise the additional benefits brought by reading for pleasure, which include literacy, well-being, life skills, good mental health, empathy, all of which are supported by libraries. The Arts Council's interests in the book sector embraces libraries, publishers, bookshops, writers, performers and readers. Libraries and publishers share the common aspiration of getting great writing and literature to readers and supporting reluctant readers to discover the richness of great literature and the wider benefits of reading. We believe there are really good opportunities for publishers to collaborate with libraries to develop their markets, reach new readers, and increase the visibility and profile of their authors. E-lending is an important offer where the opportunity of improved relations, understanding and collaboration between publishers and libraries could benefit both sides and, of course, readers. E-book sales rose steadily in the early part of the last decade, as Emma has indicated, but then plateaued in the mid-teens. During COVID, e-lending took off like a rocket. E-lending has remained well above pre-COVID levels, which presents challenges for libraries in terms of the higher cost of e-book licenses compared to the cost of physical book stock, and the difficulty of managing those restrictive licenses with the demand from library users. So the Arts Council is doing 2 things in this field. One is the project that brings us here today. We've funded Libraries Connected to explore what opportunity there is for making the e-licensing market more mutually beneficial to both publishers and libraries, with the ultimate beneficiaries being readers and authors. The second is our funding of a planned survey of existing e-borrowers to try to understand how access to e-books affects their book buying intentions. This is a separate but complementary project to the pilot being discussed here today. We recognise that e-lending presents some perceived risk to publishers. If some readers can borrow for free, they may well choose not to buy. However, we're also aware that anecdotally, many e-borrowers are heavy readers who borrow and also buy them for themselves or as gifts, or who borrow to explore new authors whom they then purchase. Since pre-COVID, I've been talking to Anthony at Merton Libraries about a means of surveying existing e-borrowers as to their potential buying habits in relation to titles that they can borrow, thinking that a survey may offer some evidence of the impact of e-lending on book buying habits. There's potential this approach may provide a level of data that could de-risk e-lending for some publishers and encourage better collaboration over reaching library customers with a more accessible range of e-stock. The only previous survey of this type was conducted most of a decade ago, commissioned, I believe, by the Society of Chief Librarians, but it was conducted in a small sample and in an entirely different market environment to what we have today. And the outcomes, I think it's fair to say, were relatively inconclusive and certainly not really applicable to the current environment. Now feels the right time to deliver a more robust survey, and I very much welcome your interest and participation in making that and this pilot happen. Thanks, Ian. Back to you.
That's fantastic. Thanks. Thank you, James. And kind of just want to acknowledge as well that, I mean, Arts Council is never just a funder. They always bring expertise, experience, and their relationships as well with them. But I think that's never more evident than in this project, where we've got James bringing not just the Arts Council's expertise and experience and relationships, but also his own personal and professional expertise and experience as well. So we're really thankful for Arts Council, not just for funding it, but for being such an active part of the programme as well. So apologies if I get a bit croaky. I've got a bit of a cold, but this is the joy of online meetings. Thank you for joining us. I started in the library sector in 2019, and I was kind of just starting to get to grips with things when the pandemic came. And one of the big shifts that we saw was that pivot to digital, the huge swing towards digital in everything from children's learning to workplaces to shopping and most government services. And our public libraries have been core to supporting those who couldn't make the shift themselves, particularly things around digital inclusion. Some of the things that came out of some of the libraries themselves, for example, Leeds Libraries kind of then created 100% digital, which then went on to has gone on to have a life of its own. And it feels a little bit frustrating then that the sector itself has struggled in some ways to have that consistent, coherent digital lending offer across all library services. And it feels like there's two factors looking at impacting this. So one is that really complex array of licensing models coming into library services with fewer people to then directly select the stock, but then also that lack of national data on digital lending and use. And these two things really fit with what James was saying there about kind of exploring the models, but then also looking at how we back that up with research and evidence. So our Libraries Connected, our members, so all of you, the library services, have asked us to focus on both these areas, and we see these two parts contributing to a solution. So we're hoping for more flexible licensing models that will allow libraries to meet their community's reading habits while making sure publishers and authors are fairly paid for their work. Better data, which can help us see who's reading and critically who's not reading, and put in place activities and promotions to help connect them with broad and diverse ranges of content. Increased diversity in the books that are available and the books that are chosen, helping people find things they might like, but might not stumble across on their own. But I think we can also go a bit further than that as well. So looking at getting that better data and understanding of what's working, and then what changes when we do promotional activities and engagement activities. And that means we can start to identify what's working in that promotion and understand the value and impact in that. And then look at how we share those lessons nationally across different publishers and library services to kind of just really continue to increase and demonstrate the social value of the public library services. So the libraries we've been talking to through our advisory committee and through the board have really stressed that they're looking for a collaborative and partnership approach. So working hand in hand with the publishers and digital lending platforms that have already done a lot to make their content more accessible and affordable to libraries. So trying to set something that works for everyone and benefits everyone, because we feel that's going to be the most sustainable thing that we can achieve, really. But it's not a standing start. So libraries have been supporting and promoting different ways that people can borrow and read. And we've got some data that shows the scale of digital borrowing and the opportunity there. So over the course of the pandemic, digital lending increased 6-fold in some places. It has settled back down, but settled back down to double what it was before. We're seeing physical borrowing back to 90% of pre-pandemic levels, and in some library services above pre-pandemic levels. We estimate around 13% of all borrowing of reading books is digital, so not audiobooks at the moment. Reading books in digital, so around 10 to 15 million loans per year. But there's huge variation in that digital lending. So some library services are lending 3%, some library service 30% of their borrowing is digital. And we really want to understand why. We want to understand the reasons behind that. Is that just because that's what their communities need, and if that does reflect what the communities need and how the communities would like to access content, that's brilliant, and that demonstrates that libraries are being responsive to the communities. But if there are obstacles and barriers in that digital borrowing, then we need to look at what they are and how we can then get over them as well. So we want to make sure that if people aren't reading digitally, then that's about their choice, rather than about limits of the system or limits of their access to devices and networks and things as well. So these pilots will be a really valuable way to test what difference we can make by working more closely together between libraries, publishers, content aggregators, really to help a broader range of readers to find a broader range of books to read, and then sharing the lessons of that so we can all benefit, and ultimately we get more people reading in whatever way they want. So I'm going to pass on to Anthony now. Anthony Hopkins is Head of Service at Merton, but he's also one of our trustees and he's the board sponsor for this project. So he's bringing accountability for us for the project, but also bringing in a wealth of experience from Merton Libraries and linking into the London Libraries Group as well. So Anthony, over to you.
Thank you. Thanks very much, Ian, and good morning, everybody. So, yeah, I'm just going to do a quick summary of kind of what James and Ian have discussed in their introductions, and really just really emphasising about the why now and the engagement and the way we want to do this. So, Ian mentioned about the obviously the significant increase we've seen in e-lending since the pandemic, and the eLicensing advisory group that I've been chairing was formed right at the start of the pandemic in 2020, and really looking at a way of which we could improve the pricing, the availability, and the licensing for ebooks and e-materials in libraries. And I won't labour too much the point about those issues, but we know that they are still significant issues and are really kind of preventing us from being able to provide a full collection that we would like to provide for our residents. So there are still continuing issues here, and we very quickly looked within that review as a point of opportunity. We feel that publishers are maybe in a different headspace now. Certainly the kind of significant rapid increasing in ebook purchasing kind of plateaued before the pandemic and has continued on that plane. And obviously, as we know, that the actual print purchases have significantly increased. So it's kind of really, we went into this in an approach of saying we don't want to change the ecosystem between book buying, book purchasing, and library purchasing and lending, but we want to make it significantly better for libraries and for publishers in terms of getting their content available through public libraries and at a better pricing point, and with models and licensing arrangements that would better meet the needs of library services to give a bit more choice and flexibility. So particularly in the first year, we had some very, very constructive conversations with publishers and aggregators, being the services that provide the platforms for our customers to borrow ebooks, so Overdrive and BorrowBox as examples. We found that there's a real willingness and an interest within looking at how we can improve the ebook ecosystem. I think also what's become apparent through our discussions is the lack of data in this area as well, and we'll be talking a little bit about data later on. We did a very small piece of work a few months ago in Merton just to understand what the picture of our ebook borrowers are, which is quite different to what the picture of what our general borrowers or library customers are overall. And think when we were doing some of the chats and some of the discussions about trying to find out from authorities about, do you know what your ebook borrowers are and who they are, potentially are, it was quite limited in terms of what we've got, and that's for very practical reasons about how we get the data and how we work with aggregators, and then how we feed it through our library management systems. So when we've been discussing the opportunities with publishers, there has been a bit of a data void, which we were hoping to improve within this pilot. But also as well, just opening up those channels of negotiation and discussion have been really, really helpful. We received some funding last year from Arts Council to fund this programme and the pilot, which Emma will talk about a bit more. I also really just wanted to emphasise Emma House's experience. So she's the appointed contractor who's been leading up on the project, and her extensive experience within publishing and working across libraries and the reading agency has really come to the fore in this. And so we've really had some good high-level conversations with publishers that have got us to a point where we are almost ready to be launching a pilot now. And some of those publishers that are coming on board have also been some of the ones that have maybe been has been the most obstructive in terms of licensing and arrangement with libraries. So we see this as a real opportunity. I think we've really gone into the spirit of negotiation and listening, and probably a different line in terms of we didn't want to take the campaigning route that some other countries, and we see there's some challenges, particularly in Germany at the moment, but not exclusive just to Germany, where there's this real tension between publishers and libraries around the licensing models and the availability. We wanted to do this more in the spirit of collaboration, and we found it very, very interesting in terms of those conversations, not only with the kind of big 5 publishers, but also with independent publishers who are really, really keen to get their stock into libraries. And we've had some really, really useful forums with publishers that have really helped to feed in quite a lot to the thinking around the project, but also have it open up some of those other doors around, you know, promotion and marketing, book suggestions, etc., and just really, really trying to improve the ecosystem as well, and really focusing in those areas in particular on the diversity of our collections and opening that up. So we've had an advisory group running for 2 years, and we've also established a national reference group as well, which includes all of the kind of key stakeholders involved in e-lending. So, you know, from our colleagues at the British Library and from CILIP to colleagues in the Publishers Association, and some key publishers as well as obviously a number of library authorities as well that are represented in those groups. So we feel it's in quite a good place now, and really this morning's session is really to share our thinking about the next stages and how you guys can get involved in the pilot and hopefully open up those ebook collections in a much greater level to our residents. So I'm just going to hand back now to Emma, who's just going to talk about some of the timeline and some of the more operational considerations for the pilot. So over to you, Emma.
Thanks, Anthony. And just a reminder that we do have the Q&A function available should anyone wish to put any questions in the chat whilst we're talking, then we can address them as we go. But I think I just want to emphasize that the spirit of collaboration that's been presented to publishers has been very well received, and we've been undertaking quite a lot of scoping and learning before shaping the final, what the pilot's actually going to look like. And I think we've all learned a lot in that time, particularly around how publishers view libraries as a valuable tool for reaching people that they may not otherwise reach with their own marketing, and how libraries can play a really powerful role, and do play a really powerful role in promoting books and reading, and especially introducing new readers to new books. And I think we really want to evidence that through these pilots, as well as trialing and testing things like business models and gathering data. As Anthony said, we've got 4 strands of work to the pilot. One is data. So So what came out loud and clear in our scoping is that we don't know very much about who are the people that are borrowing ebooks from libraries. Are they the same as active library members? Do your ebook borrowers borrow physical books as well as ebooks? What are their demographics? Are we able to use the ebook lending system to reach new demographics of readers or potential readers? So learning about who our ebook readers are, what their habits are, is going to be a really important and valuable part of the pilot. The second one is consumer buying behaviours, and so as James and Anthony mentioned, there's a separate strand of work on research that we will conduct through the libraries, but also with the help of our aggregator partners who are on this webinar as well. So if you do have any questions that are specifically directed at Overdrive and Belinda, they are on the webinar with us as well. Promotion. So again, can we use this pilot to bring libraries and publishers closer together? And that's a two-way street. So throughout our activities that we've been doing with publishers, we've also identified that there is a group of librarians out there who are very active on their own social media and promoting books and reviewing books. Publishers are obviously looking for people that they could send advanced reading copies to, promotional materials to review those books. So we're hoping to do a bit more in terms of linking up publishers and libraries. Part of the pilot, when we're asking publishers to input titles into the pilot, will be around what promotional materials can you provide to libraries to promote these particular books. So libraries who come on board for this will have access to a whole range of digital, physical assets, access to the author, and access to other marketing materials that they can use to promote those particular titles. So that's going to be hopefully some really good outcomes there on working out what works well between publishers and libraries in terms of working together and promoting books and reading together. And finally, the business model side of things. A very interesting fact that came out to us during our scoping is that most independent publishers don't even know if their books are available for ebook lending. And there's a very simple reason for that, and that's because in between the library, the aggregator, and the publisher is another fourth party, shall we say, which is the distributor of ebooks that the publisher appoints on their behalf to feed their ebooks through into different channels, both retail and the library aggregators. And so we will be working and have been working with these set of distributors to make sure that a different range of business models will be available to the publisher for selling their ebooks into libraries. So that kind of clarifies the four strands of works: data, research, business models, and promotion. So I'll move on now to what the shape of the pilot will actually look like. So we're aiming to start in January, and we're aiming to work across a broad range of publishers, both small and large publishers, to input a series of titles into the pilot that will be available on 3 different business models. So the general business model right now is 1 copy, 1 user, and there's a variety of business models within that. So it could be that you buy a copy and you're able to loan it out 52 times or 26 times, or it might be available on a time limited license. So you might be able to lend it out for a year and then you need to renew it. So our aim is to have on this particular 1 copy, 1 user business model is that it's not necessarily time limited, but you could borrow it for a certain amount of loan. You can loan it out a certain amount of times before buying another copy. Now that business model is suitable for books which you think are going to be reasonably popular, maybe not the best sellers like a Richard Osman or a Lessons in Chemistry, but that you would see a reasonable demand for, but would only justify buying one copy of that book, knowing that it might be loaned 26 times, 52 times. The second business model is aimed at those really big bestsellers where you may be going out and buying 10, 20, 30 copies on the one copy, one user business model in order to satisfy the demand. Now, this multi-access model will allow you to loan that ebook to multiple people at the same time. There will be a cap on the amount of times it can be loaned, and that will vary between the different aggregators, but you will be able to loan that single copy to multiple people at the same time. So we'll hopefully reduce the waiting list and allow more people to access that title at the same time. And the third model, which is something that we're keen to explore with you on this call, and we would welcome your views in the Q&A, is the transactional licensing model. So what this means is that you make the book available in your catalogue, but you don't actually purchase a copy of that book. But when somebody goes in and borrows that book, it will trigger a payment to the publisher for that one read of that book. So what we're keen to explore is whether this is a model that libraries are happy to buy into. It's not currently a model that is particularly active with the aggregators, and there will need to be some work on behalf of the aggregators to set this model up and enable it to be used. But what it does do is allow you to showcase a number of titles in your catalogue without actually buying them. And it will allow your readers to borrow those books. But again, you won't actually have a copy on your system. It will just trigger a payment for that particular read. So that's the advantage of this. And for example, we've got a couple of titles in our 250 titles that we're going to put into the pilot, which are translated poetry. And you may think, okay, we don't have an audience for translated poetry, but we'd like to offer it. We'll do a bit of promotion around it. We'll allow people to borrow it, but we won't actually own a copy. So we would like your views on that business model before we introduce that business model into the pilot. We think it's something that could be quite valuable for libraries, certainly valuable for publishers, particularly small publishers, but will allow libraries to test out different genres, different authors, different types of books without actually committing to buying a copy of that book. So please do give us your feedback on that, and we may have the aggregators come on and talk a little bit more about that. So the idea is that the 250 titles that we choose will be available for libraries to purchase on one of those models. The choice on which business model you purchase the titles will be down to you. So you may decide to invest in quite a few of them on a multi-access model. You may decide to just go down the route of one copy, one user, or you may decide to put them in your catalogue on the transactional license. But we would like libraries to engage in all 250 of those titles. These business models for these titles will be exclusive to the libraries that participate in the pilots. There will be titles in that catalogue that will not be available to anyone else to purchase whilst the pilot is ongoing. And as I said, you will have access to a dedicated portal where you will find a whole range of marketing assets connected to those titles that you'll be able to download yourself. You'll be able to have contact with the publisher. It may be the authors available to do events either online or in person, but those marketing kits for the titles will be made available for you to have easy access to. So that I think covers the models and the promotion. And we will be asking participating libraries to be actively involved in the data collections and the research that we've outlined that are part of this pilot. As I say, we aim to get going in January, and the pilot will last for 6 months, after which we'll be doing some evaluation, which will include talking to the stock managers to say, how did you find the business models? Did it help you with your budgeting? How would you like to see business models work moving forward? So I think I've talked quite a lot here. I think now's an opportunity really for people to ask any questions. I think we've got the proposed cost per issue. Now that will be negotiated between the aggregators and the publishers directly. What we hope to be able to do is provide an idea of budget implications and costs to those that have expressed an interest in joining the pilots. We will then be able to provide the list of titles and what the different costs are underneath the different business models that will be supplied by the aggregators. There is a similar transactional model in place for one of the online film resources, explored it but decided not to do it. So as I say, we really would like feedback on this as to whether libraries would go down that route of doing the transactional model, or whether there's a real blanket, no, we're not interested. There are a lot of cost implications for the aggregators to include this business model. Have we got any more questions on what the pilots would look like and what might be expected of libraries? I don't know if Belinda or Overdrive want to come on and talk about the transactional model any further.
If not, Emma, I might just step in there just on that element, because I was just typing something into the post, but it's probably easier that I mention it. This is very much about giving library authorities the choice. So we're not recommending one model over the other, but we were particularly thinking about the simultaneous issues license model. Could be a real opportunity, particularly for bestsellers. And, you know, the examples that we've had from some library authorities where, you know, you've got in effect, you know, 500 reservations or holds on a one copy loan. So it could be that you might want to consider buying some of those multi-access loans for a very short period around those bestsellers, to really meet with the demand for 2 to 3 months and cap it. So that's just some of the thinking, and obviously very interested to see how you may use those models as part of the pilot.
Yeah, I'm happy to step in briefly here. Inevitably, at Overdrive, we tried to persuade publishers and aggregators to allow all of the available models as opposed to focusing on just one of them. As Anthony says, the multi-user models are extraordinarily useful for handling short-term peak demand. They are not necessarily ideal in isolation, and if you're also trying to build a digital collection for the long term, it makes sense to own copies on both multi-user and one copy, one user. Going back to the transactional cost per issue or cost per checkout model, that too has some very useful applications, but it's not effective in isolation. If you, for example, wanted to establish a collection in Ukrainian because you knew that there was an audience for ebooks and audiobooks in the Ukrainian language, but like me, you didn't have the first idea how to curate such a collection, then with one copy, with transactional pricing, you can turn on everything that's available and allow the borrowers to direct your budget in appropriately, and then buy permanent copies of the titles that have turned out to be popular. Similarly, you might want to do something like that with manga or with another format or another category where you don't necessarily have the expertise or experience to curate a collection that's purchased outright right from the start. What you do need, though, and what I think a lot of library authorities currently struggle with, is the resources to actively manage your digital collection and optimize your use of the different lending models that are available. That is time consuming and requires the digital collection to be taken at least as seriously in terms of resource allocation and staff planning as the physical collection. And I think that's something that we're a long way short of at the moment.
Sorry, could I just say something coming from the acquisitions department of GLL Greenwich? I know with the transactional ones that before, when we've spoken about other, the films, for instance, because budgets are so limited now and so tight, it's the only thing is that, you know, if you have that model, you don't know how much you need to put aside for it and how much is going to spend, you know, you need to spend on it. So that's a bit of an unknown thing. However, the simultaneous access is very popular with us. You know, I think it's only for ebooks, isn't it, and not ebooks, e-audio on the whole, but you know, we really like that model and we'd like that expanded.
I'll just respond very briefly. We are having, as Emma alluded to, quite a lot of success now in persuading ebook publishers to take up the simultaneous use licenses as well, but only ever as an option alongside one book, one user, never instead of one book, one user. And you're absolutely right in terms of the transactional pricing. It's of no use whatsoever if it doesn't come coupled with the budgetary controls that you need to set caps, set limits, and also appropriate messaging or appropriate user journeys for borrowers when your budget is used up, so that they get some kind of the borrower gets some kind of soft landing as opposed to simply being told no. And I've lost my thread now. There was something else that I was going to say as well. Yes, and fundamentally, it's not a very comfortable situation to, in effect, be betting against yourself. The idea is that we have digital services in order to promote them to the public and encourage the public to make more use of them. If you're running something that is purely cost per checkout or cost per issue driven, you're betting against yourself. The more successfully you promote the service, the more it costs you to run it. And that doesn't feel like a very rational equation.
A question that I had, Nick, was whether libraries might be able to put a cap of some kind, be it budget or number of loans that a single person can take on the transactional licensing. Is there any controls that can be put in place for that?
I can only speak for Overdrive, but yes, we do have quite a comprehensive toolkit for libraries to control the way in which costs are racked up against titles on cost per checkout. But it should only ever be regarded as one dimension to managing a collection. It's never going to be an all-inclusive answer. One further observation. Part of our expertise in this and part of our experience comes from competing with some pretty large scale cost per checkout service providers in North America. And they find libraries which use those services find themselves having to ration users' access to the service really quite heavily in order to control costs. And it's far from ideal. I can see one question there about scope to investigate a single purchase model. Have we addressed that?
We haven't, Nick.
So the question is there any scope to investigate a single purchase model, i.e. buy the title without expiry? I'm going to stray, if I'm not careful, into my personal views here as opposed to those of Overdrive. But we have a significant number of publishers who quite happily provide content without an expiry date. So the title is purchased on a one copy, one user license and is owned in perpetuity by the library that has purchased it. We have other publishers who insist on some kind of time expiry. And then we have publishers who insist on a combination of metered access and a time expiry. So you might get a license that's worth that allows for 26 loans, and after 2 years, your license in the title expires regardless. What I say to libraries, generally speaking, when talking about this, is that I don't like licenses that expire on the strength of time, regardless of usage. We try to encourage publishers not to offer titles on that footing. And I can only encourage you to vote with your feet. And if you can possibly avoid buying titles on licenses like that, then do so.
I think, Ian, there's some questions in the chat about the commitments around data and research. I wonder if we move on to that, and you know, please keep putting your questions in the Q&A so that we can, you know, as they come to you, or you can follow up with us afterwards.
Yep. So if I move on to the data, and I'll answer some of the questions that I can see in the chat as well. Just on the modelling, I mean, we are encouraging authorities to look at all of the different licensing models as part of this to test some of the thinking. The other thing about the budget is, yes, there does need to be a commitment around budget, but what we would be looking at is working within your existing frameworks of your contract. So you in terms of what you're committing to spend with whatever contractors you're in, with whatever aggregators you have, that we'd just be able to, that you'd be earmarking some of that agreed budget that you already have to put into the pilot and the titles here. And more detail will come out about that when the expression of interest form comes through in terms of the levels of spend and the requirements. But just on to some of the data capturing and some of the things that we wanted to capture within the pilot as well. I think I said at the start that there's not a lot of data that we know about library customers who are ebook borrowers. We obviously have a very good picture about our overarching demographics and usage of libraries, but very difficult to break that down into our ebook borrowers. So as part of the pilot, what we'd be looking is working with the participating authorities to build up that data knowledge, and there'll be some requirements in terms of data sharing, which will be discussed a bit more in the expression of interest, and then in terms of entering the agreement to be part of the pilot. But in effect, the things which we want to find out about ebook borrowers are particularly about that journey from beginning to end around borrowing, but also particularly around demographic understanding, so age, ethnicity, gender, postcode, so locality of where the person is, and disability. There is a perception amongst publishers that some publishers, I should say, that an ebook borrower is someone that could probably have the financial means to purchase that stock themselves. And why wouldn't they do that through other means? And why would we want to provide e-lending? It's a difficult argument to counteract at the moment because we don't have the data. But obviously, in the spirit of cooperation and coordination in this project, we're looking to produce that data and hopefully dispel some of those myths around that. The other things we're really looking as well about is total numbers of active ebook borrowers. So the number and how that compares to your overall membership figures. The total number of loans now and after the 6-month period, so seeing if through the pilot there's been some particular changes or habits changes within either utilizing the new licensing models or having some of that stock available to libraries that wasn't there before. Also, if there's any new trends on waiting lists and holds, so starting to build up a bit of a data information around what the top 10 titles are, and this would be across all participating authorities to see again if there's some synergy between authorities and the challenges in terms of ebook borrowing and the opportunities through this pilot. And then really just any other anecdotal information on requests for titles and genres. Also looking at the most borrowed items during the pilot, and that's split between the business models. So looking at how you may utilize those licensing models. So, will you still be spending predominantly, as most authorities do, on single copy access, or will you be putting more investment into experimenting in multi-access? And just kind of reasons and findings within that around what you found and what you've encountered. So, did some of those challenges about capping and spending all the budget on simultaneous loans within a short period of time come true, or was it more consistent with overall value? And also if we can see any correlation between the increased marketing and promotion of some of the ebook stock in the collection and whether that's had an impact on loans. We'll be providing some guidance for authorities on how to gather this data and how to feed it into the project. The key thing really is the main thing is to ensure, and this is just a bit of a tip for authorities, is that you can obtain the library membership number from your aggregators. So as long as you can get that information, you should be able to pull most of the information out and then feed that back into the library management system. But that is the key thing, just to check in the first instance, that you can actually see and who your library members are through the library membership number in the aggregators databases. So that was just some bits and pieces in terms of data and why we're collecting it. Ian and James will speak in a little bit later on a bit more about some of the surveying that we're also going to be undertaking as part of this. So we'll be looking to put a survey onto the platforms to be able to get some more informed information from your customers about their preferences. Also particularly about if stock isn't available, would they purchase it, would they not? How do they consume book stock? How much do they purchase? How much do they borrow for libraries? Any preferences over physical, digital? Just so that we're getting a really good understanding of what that kind of profile is around our customers, our customer base. But as I said, within this is an opportunity to really, experiment a little bit more than you would normally do. Also within the perspective that we are looking at reduced price points on this stock. So also that means that you should be seeing some opportunities to maybe, flex your budgets a bit more than what we'd normally be able to through the current pricing models. Okay, and then I'm just going to hand back to Emma now, who's just going to, if you've got anything to add further on promotion and promotion of the stock in the pilot. Thank you.
Yeah, I think I've covered promotion, Anthony. I mean, again, I think it would be useful to hear from libraries about, you know, what kind of promotional materials might be helpful to you. What we're really keen to do, and what the titles will do is also list target audiences. So I know, Anthony, in Merton with Wimbledon Book Fest, you've done some work on targeting local rugby clubs, for example, to get men into joining the library and borrowing books. But so one of the aims is to really encourage libraries and publishers to work together in going out to find new demographics, maybe new community groups, as said, new, you know, local rugby clubs, it could be barber shops, etc. So what kind of marketing materials and support would be really useful for you? Is it point of sale material? Is it posters? Is it bookmarks? Is it access to the author, digital assets? You know, what would be really helpful to you, so that we can communicate to publishers to say what libraries are really asking for is this, to be able to promote individual titles, particularly if you're purchasing them on a multi-access license and really want people to engage with them, or if you want to team up with a certain publisher to say, Leeds Library, for example, teamed up with Blue Moose Books to do a big takeover of the library, which include posters of all the books available. It included displays, it included author events, and that takeover lasted for a month with a really good impact on getting Blue Moose Books into the hands of Leeds Library book borrowers. So yeah, any ideas, we're very keen for people to come on board and share with us, so that we can make sure publishers are supplying exactly what you want and what you need. I think, is it Ian, you in research now?
Yeah, brilliant. I'll pick up on that now. Thank you, Emma. And thank you everyone in the chat as well. I just want to pick out one question in the chat. Someone's just mentioned about consortia as well. So with the shared ebook catalogue, would all member authorities need to be on board, or could individual authorities take part in the pilot? I think that would need to be a discussion potentially with the consortium, but if you are a member of the consortium, then please do put in an expression of interest, because we can always collate. And if we've got half of a consortium, then we would want to be talking to that consortium directly and talking to you individually as well. So whether you're part of consortium or not, then do put in an expression of interest. It's not committing to anything as well. So I just want to talk a little bit about the research and the way we're doing it. I think Anthony's covered a lot of the issues and the detail around that as well. We just wanted to kind of pull out a couple of it. So the research we've commissioned research, and as James was saying at the start, this is kind of bringing together two strands. So one's about evaluating the pilot, and one's about answering that big question, really, does borrowing lead to buying, whether that's physical or digital, and does digital borrowing in particular lead to ongoing purchasing, or does it cannibalize purchases? We think, and I think as a sector, we think that any reading leads to further book purchases. So that our expectation would be that. But whatever we find out from it, having a concrete answer to that question is going to be a really, really positive thing. James, do you want to come in there?
Yeah, just to add, I mean, that's all absolutely spot on, Ian. I think one of the it's probably helpful to say at the outset that one of the outcomes we expect is that there will be a mixed picture. We're not in any way anticipating that the survey will suggest that all e-borrowers are avid purchasers of books. And equally, you know, there will be some, but we're not expecting all answers to say, if I can borrow it for free, I'm never going to buy again. We've got a lot of anecdotal evidence that there are many different types of e-borrowers, and I personally know of many who use e-borrowing services to just for volume, because they're avid readers, but also to try new authors and to explore titles that they then quite often go on to buy either for themselves or often as gifts, or to recommend to others. So we think it's quite a nuanced and dynamic economy in that respect, and we're not expecting to come out of this with hard data that says publishers should absolutely open their doors unlimitedly to libraries because there's no risk to their bottom line. We recognise that this will be a mixed message for publishers, but one that we think is potentially very positive, that shows the great engagement that libraries offers, often with markets that or with audiences that the publishers claim they're unable to reach or don't have access to. And so we think that there are huge potential benefits all round. So I just wanted to kind of set out that the outcome will be quite a complex piece of work to analyse and to kind of relay back into the trade as well. But it feels very positive at this point, and it also comes in effectively a vacuum of any robust data, because as I alluded to earlier, there was a Society of Chief Librarians, quite a small scale piece of work back in, I think, 2015 that only involved 4 library services. And the pitching of that, I think, was perhaps reflected the market conditions at the time. And I think the questions asked and the data gathered isn't particularly applicable today. Since then, the market has changed significantly for ebooks as well as for e-lending. But since then, also there was a piece of Nielsen market research that was commissioned by the Booksellers Association, and that used one of their 700 strong user forums. It wasn't kind of hard data, so to speak. It was using one of their focus groups, and that provided interesting material, but again was somewhat inconclusive, even though that inquiry was pitched by the Booksellers Association that certainly at the time was sceptical of the value of e-lending. I think it's fair to say, with all due respect. And so again, that didn't necessarily give, from a library perspective, but also I think from a publisher perspective, a balanced and robust picture of what the positive opportunities for increasing e-lending might be. Just to give a little bit more rounding to that.
That's brilliant. Thank you, James. Yeah, and we've got, I mean, the key thing I think for us is making sure we get the right evaluator in place. So we've gone through a procurement process, and we've got 5 proposals that we'll be evaluating, and they literally just came in yesterday. Deadline was yesterday. I've had a quick look through, and they're all really, really good. So I think we're going to get a really, really strong evaluation or commissioned evaluation out of this. So I think, like James is saying, it's not about what's libraries good or bad. It's going to be about this is the picture, this is the detail, and this is kind of hopefully the nuance that we can then start to use as we're going through. So what we're trying to get out really then is things like the data on the impact of the models. Did more people borrow? Did different people borrow? And what did it do to the costs? What did it do for engagement with the libraries? And then that critical thing, what do people do alongside or after borrowing? Did they buy more physical or digital? Did they read a digital book digitally? And then did they buy a copy of it physically to give as a present? That kind of thing. Or did they use it to test out a new author and then started to buy digitally or physically other copies from other content from that author as well? And so I think the key thing really want to stress with this is that what we're trying to do is make sure that this is realistic and appropriate to what the libraries can do as well. So we've got 2 things that we're doing. One is that we're talking with the aggregators to make sure, if possible, we're able to use the lending platforms, so BorrowBox and Libby, as the channel for the survey. So see if we can do that, and we're hoping that that's going to be possible, which will then take a bit of load off the libraries. We're also, we've really stressed in the discussions we've had with providers and also in the ITT for the provider that it needs to be a collaborative approach. So we haven't set up this is how you need to collect information from libraries. This is how these things work. We've basically said that we want the provider, the research provider, the evaluator to work with the pilot libraries to make something that works for them as well. Because what we want to do is make sure we get that balance between something that's robust, but also something that's realistic. We'd rather have more data and the right data in rather than having it to be absolutely perfect. But again, we want it as robust as possible. So it's that just trying to get that balance. And I think we'll get that balance by supporting the evaluators to work in partnership with the libraries. One other thing we're looking at with that is obviously evaluating and surveying the pilot libraries and their users, but also looking at a control group as well. So there might be an opportunity to join a control group where you're not part of the pilot, but you are providing some of this data in as well. So it might be a way to contribute to the project without necessarily having to make that commitment around costs. But then obviously you don't get the benefit of new licensing models and the benefit of all the promotional assets and things as well. So it is a way to get involved, but it's one that has a lot less benefit than actually being part of the pilot. The reason we want controls outside of that is that we're conscious that we wouldn't probably have thought of this about 4 years ago, but we're conscious that in that 6 months, January to June next year, there could be new pandemic restrictions, there could be library closures, all that kind of stuff. We aren't expecting it, but that could happen. But we also know that the rate of change around how these licensing models are evolving and how the relationship with publishers and aggregators is evolving is that the background picture is kind of moving anyway. And so we want to use control group to try and map that and have that kind of that moving baseline throughout that as well. The third thing that we're doing to support this is that we're also doing a broader data collection, which I think you probably have heard about, this Strand 1 data collection, which is about looking at library data as a whole. And we're bringing in, or we're seeking data for the 22-23 financial year for that, again, to use as a background picture to then feed into this this evaluation as well. So if you are wondering whether to take part in that, then contributing to that will also help this project as well. And we've got about 60-65% of the library services across England so far, which is absolutely brilliant. We're aiming for 100% with that as well, so please do get your returns in for that too. I'm going to pass back to Emma now, if no one's got any specific questions around the research and evaluation. We'll be appointing and announcing the evaluators over the next week or so. So they'll be able to start introducing themselves to people as they start registering an expression of interest for the pilots as well. Thank you.
I just want to touch on what the benefits will be for libraries to join in with the pilot. So I think it is a real opportunity to test out the new business models and to see if the flexibility around the licenses does have an impact on both your budget management and also your stock collection. So are you able to take chances on books you don't know if they're going to be borrowed or not? Are you able to increase the breadth of your stock collection so that it's coming online with your physical book collection? Obviously, it takes a long time to build up a collection, but does these licensing models help with this? Another benefit will be around understanding the data and help better target promotions at different demographics. So having a clear understanding around who the ebook users are. And then the other benefit, I think, is really having access to the publisher's assets and tools that we're going to put in place that will hopefully bring libraries and publishers much more closely together, and that those relationships can continue into the longer term, and having access to books, as I say, that aren't currently available in the ebook lending system. So I do hope that libraries will see a number of different benefits to being able to get involved. There's a comment there about don't use BorrowBox or Libby. Are you able to let us know, Sinead, who you do use? That would be really helpful. Yeah, we can put it in the expression of interest. Next steps are that we will send around a form to everyone that signed up for the webinar to fill in. This is only an expression of interest to say that you would be interested in receiving more information. And we will come back to you with more details around budget and research and data, as we say, to enable you to fully commit to this. So that will be the next step. But obviously we're available for any further questions. But yeah, keen to understand which aggregators people are using if you don't use BorrowBox or Libby.
Do you mind if I say something? I'm from Belinda.
Thank you, Rachel. We'd love that.
Hi. Just wanted to say good morning to everybody. And I wanted to say thanks, Emma, and to everybody who's working on this, because we all know how hard this is. You can appreciate these are all things that we'll have been wrestling with for a number of years. The market's built up over the last sort of 10 years here. I started out in ebooks a long time ago, and the landscape's so different now. So I just wanted to extend my compliments to you guys for wrestling with all these tricky things. And I really hope that it's going to be possible for as many libraries as possible to get on board, so that we can get some data that's going to drive publisher behaviour here, and that we will support in any way that we possibly can. Really, I've been sitting quiet because there's lots of complexities to all of this. But if anybody has got any specific questions for us, I'll do my best to answer. Emma, is the aim of today just to get? Are you able to give people more of a shape of what the commitment's going to be like for people in terms of time and money and stuff, or are you outlining the idea and then that'll take shape over the next few months?
Yeah, I mean, I think that does come under different headings. So one is the stock collection and engaging with the 250 titles that are going to be in the collection that we're piloting with. So there's engagement with the stock collection. Obviously, we can't give budget implications yet because we haven't agreed on what those titles are going to be yet. But that will come. Second is on promotion and engaging really in promoting those books to readers in different ways, and trialing out new ways of book promotion and marketing. As I say, going above and beyond what may be done already around social media, for example, newsletters, website. So is there anything else innovative that could be done, like, as I say, a publisher takeover of the library, or really saying we're going to focus on men in our area and get them joining the library and borrowing books, and therefore we're going to go and partner with the rugby clubs or football clubs or barber shops where we know men are hanging out. So promotion is another one. Data will be an important one. So I'd imagine that currently there isn't that much that happens around data collection. So really engaging on the data collection side, seeing if we can shift the dial on the demographics that are engaged in ebook borrowing, looking at the trends on what people are borrowing from the libraries and whether the promotion makes a difference. So just helping us better understand that. And on the research side of things as well, is just encouraging people to take part in the research. So I think that should really encapsulate the 4 areas of work and how we want to work with libraries on this. And yes, acknowledge that this might incur extra budget, it might incur extra time and extra resource, particularly on the promotion and data collection side of things. But we would hope that the benefits of being part of that and engaging with that will have a longer term impact as well. Did you want to say anything else, Rachel? Is there anything else you want to understand, particularly around transactional licensing?
I was wondering, did you say earlier that it's us going to be doing the negotiation on the pricing, as in the aggregator?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, the transactional pricing, the only thing that concerns me is that, we all imagine that the price is going to be lower. But some publishers might just set it as the price of buying a book. That's my only concern. But I'm sure you've been discussing that with our senior team in great detail, and everybody's aware of that. It's got to be sensible, hasn't it? It's got to be
exactly
representing.
Yeah. Ian, I think back to you.
Yeah, I was just going to add to that as well. I think Emma's done a great job of really engaging with a lot of the publishers as well and getting them on board. So I think the publishers who are part of this, who are starting to sign up for this, have got a really strong sense that what we're trying to do and what we're trying to achieve with this as well. So I think the expectation is that publishers would be aligning prices in line with the aims of the project as well. So are we on to just next steps then and pulling it together? Yeah. So do you want to pick up on that, Emma, or do you want me to?
I think it's really about sending out the expression of interest form and getting people to, I think, we're looking for 20 authorities to sign up to the pilot. And I think we'll obviously take questions after this if people have got more questions. And then, as I say, the form is just an expression of interest. I mean, I don't know if I put in how many people are interested, if you can just give me a thumbs up if you think you might be interested. We'd love to gauge initial interest in coming on board. And if there's any concerns that people want to pop in the chat as well, that might stop you from showing an expression of interest, I think we'd love to know that at this stage as well.
Yeah. And if you do have concerns as well, please don't let it. You could highlight that on the expression of interest forms as well. So do submit an expression of interest, and then we can look at how we can address those concerns too. So remember, it's not a commitment, the expression of interest. We're really trying to get in a sense of whether and how to help you to be part of the pilot as well, and how we can support you with that. In terms of moving LMS during that period, that could be an interesting challenge, but we're always up for interesting challenges as well. So again, I mean, do put an expression of interest in if you feel that you can manage that as well. We don't want to put too much burden on library services either. Does anyone have any further questions then? Oh, yes, absolutely, Dave. So just highlighting about needing to be clear about that library budget and resource requirements. So as we start going through that, I think as we get expressions of interest in, that will then support us in kind of really cementing and consolidating those arrangements with the publishers, and also support the aggregators in their negotiations with the publishers as well, which will then feed back into that clarity on the library budget and resource requirements as well. So in a sense, the more expressions of interest and the more libraries have got part of it, the stronger our hand there as well, which really helps. So, any more questions? Either put them in the chat or do raise a hand if you want to as well. Oh, Dave Lloyd.
Thank you, Ian. I suppose my main question is, if you're looking for 20 library authorities and the expression of interest, you need library authorities who commit the resources to this project, of which the biggest one to me seems to be the marketing and promotion. So on the expression of interest, are you asking us to be outlining potential levels of marketing, promotion, projects? I think Emma's done quite a nice job in terms of highlighting some of the examples within it, because the project of 20 authorities is going to decline depending on their marketing, promotion and the data that you're going to get back.
Yes, absolutely. We're in the process of finalising that EOI. I think the EOI is going out later on today. So we'll make sure that there is just a little space to include that as well. But really good to highlight that as well, because I think we'd sort of thought that the big obstacle could be the stock budget, but actually I think you're right. It's that ability for the library to then use their resources to do all of that marketing and promotion as well, which could fit within existing resources and could fit within existing plans as well. But it depends how tightly resourced the library service is, I suppose, as well.
I think stock budgets are quite a clear yes or no. You either have it or you don't.
Yeah.
Library resources can be staffing resources
Yeah.
For me, we've got purchasing, we've got data collection and research, but the marketing and promotion to me seems to be the potential big one. I can see myself needing to spend more staff and resources on the marketing and promotion campaign than I think I would need to spend on selecting 250 titles and or their operating model.
Yeah.
So I think Dave, what we're saying is have a look at the list and work out what works for you and what works for your audience. As I say, it might be you decide to, just pick one publisher. Say I'll pick Fitzcarraldo out of the list. An indie publisher, London-based. You might say, God, their titles look really interesting with them. We're going to put a lot of our marketing efforts behind working just with that publisher and see if we can change the dial. Or you might say, we'll work with one publisher a month and get them to, we'll talk to them directly, get them to send us a load of stuff, and we'll just focus on those. I think what we're not necessarily saying is you've got to put loads of marketing effort and spend behind every single title. But I think it would be great if you could look at the list, look at your libraries, look at what works for you, look at your resources and say, do you know what, this is this translated poetry collection is really interesting. We're going to put our marketing efforts behind that. Or, we love the work of Fitzcarraldo. We're going to put our marketing efforts behind that. And yes, we'll mention the other titles in our usual marketing, but we're just going to go the extra step with this publisher or these 10 titles or something like that. So don't feel too much pressure on having to put loads of effort and budget behind every single title or every single publisher. I think, we do acknowledge and recognise the constraints around resource in libraries for this, but it would be really great to see, something innovative coming out of each participating authority, even if it's with one publisher or a small set of the titles.
Brilliant, thank you. And also, I suppose, don't feel the need to reinvent the wheel as well, because what we'd like to do with this is make sure that the pilot library services are all connected up as well. So if one library service is looking at doing something on a specific publisher or a specific author or around a specific content, then that could be shared across the other library services as well. So we don't each need to do something completely different. We could do something that's collaborative as well, which would be, again, a real positive that comes out of the programme as well. If there are no further questions, then please do get in touch and ask any further. Oh, we've got one more question. Yeah, so Emma will be there to support libraries as well, and also we've got the team at Libraries Connected to support as well. So we'll all be there behind you as well. The expression of interest form will be coming out later on today, so please do have a look at it and please do submit an expression of interest. If you have any questions, then please do get in touch with any of us directly. Emma, Daniel will be the main point of contact for this, so please do get in touch with her and she'll filter it through to the person in the team or deal with it herself. So do feel like, please don't feel like this is the end of the conversation. This is kind of the start of a conversation, and I think it's it just feels like a really exciting project. I really hope we can get as many libraries part of it as possible and really get some robust data and evidence out of it, but also try and get a positive shift in terms of the way that libraries and publishers and authors are all able to work together as well, because that all just benefits us all. So thank you, and you've got 10 minutes back through your day as well. There's one quick question from Matthew Cadger. It will be a list of around 250 titles, and then you can choose from that list. So you don't need to choose the whole 250, you choose from that list. And so it's not necessarily going to be a huge commitment. And then in terms of, Lucy's just had a question about a mixture of both formats. This will just be ebooks, so it'll just be digital content. it could be a mixture of the two licensing models. So it could be that you can choose 50 of them at a larger purchase simultaneous access model, and then perhaps have the remaining 200 or another set based on the single paper loan model as well. But we'll be able to provide more detail on that to libraries who've expressed an interest, and once we've got those discussions a bit firmer with the aggregators and the publishers as well. But thank you for joining us. We'll be sharing the recording of this as well out to anyone who's been part of it. So please do share that around to colleagues as well if you need to, if they've got questions as well. And we hope to hear from you soon as well. Thank you. And thank you to particularly Anthony, James and Emma for their contribution today, and to the aggregators as well, because it's really helpful having them as such a core part of the process as well. Thank you. Bye.